Are you curious about knowledge-rich ELA instruction? Maybe you're wondering why there might be resistance to teaching with knowledge-rich topics and texts. Or you've wanted to know how to tell if your curriculum is knowledge-rich. Well, today we'll be talking to David Liben about shifting the focus of literacy instruction to knowledge. He'll answer your questions and share some hilarious and powerful stories from teachers in the field.
Hi, teacher friends. I'm Lori.
And I'm Melissa.
We are two educators who want the best for all kids, and we know you do too.
We worked together in Baltimore when the district adopted a new literacy curriculum.
We realized there was so much more to learn about how to teach reading and writing.
Lori and I can't wait to keep learning with you today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Melissa and Lori Love Literacy. Today, we are talking with David Liben about what happens when we shift to knowledge-building curriculum.
And David is the co-author of one of our favorite books, and we're not just saying that because he's here with us. That's serious. One of our favorite books, Know Better, Do Better. And him and Meredith Liben are in the process of writing another book right now. So before we jump into the content, David, we'd love to get a little sneak peek of your new book if we're allowed to. Can you tell us anything?
The first book, as you guys know, was all about foundational skills. And it came in at the right time with the science of reading and so forth. But we feel strongly that the science of reading is not just phonics. And it's not even just phonics and knowledge, although thank goodness that knowledge is getting, it's getting its foot in the door, a door in the foothold, or whatever that expression is. But this is everything. This is everything about reading other than foundational skills. So that means it addresses vocabulary, it addresses morphology, it addresses syntax, it addresses knowledge, and it addresses this thing which almost gets no attention in the science of reading, and that's called comprehension. What actually does it mean? What does it mean what if all these things are in place? And what if students have the knowledge, the syntax knowledge, the vocabulary, and then they still don't comprehend the text? Because there's interesting research, for example, by Kane and Oakhill over a period of years, showing that students don't always use the knowledge they have, A, and B, sometimes they use the wrong knowledge. For example, if you've got a text that students are reading on hibernation, and a student makes a connection to his grandfather's naps, that's not really relevant knowledge for hibernation. So it's all of reading, going from, as I said, from everything, and especially the science behind comprehension. Because there is a science behind comprehension going all the way back to the mid-'80s by cognitive scientists, showing how is science represented in the mind? What does it mean when you comprehend the text? And one quiz you can give yourself and your listeners can give is try to explain to someone what comprehension is without using a synonym for comprehension. And that's one of the things, it's really tricky. That's one of the things we're doing in this book, but it takes around 50 pages to do that. And to do that so that everybody understands it. So that part of the book is going to be new to everybody. It's really, what does comprehension mean? How is it built up from the beginning of a text to the end and in all those steps in between?
Well, I'll just tell you really quickly that a lot of our friends have asked for just this from you all. So I know it's a ton of work. We've had a lot of requests when we read Know Better, Do Better with some of our friends in a little book club. And they said, what about the rest of reading? What can they write about the rest? Because you all did it so well in Know Better, Do Better with foundational skills that people will love it once it's done.
So we know that comprehension is so important, David, like you just said. It's taking you 50 pages to explain the science behind it. And we also know that knowledge is a really important contributor to comprehension. So I'm thinking it might be a really good time to think about what changes happen when we shift to knowledge-rich instruction. Do you have anything that you want to share around that? Like, what changes happen for students in their minds, in their classroom experience?
This shift to knowledge instruction in the knowledge-based curriculums we have, all of which I love, and as a lot of you know, many of which I was deeply involved in. it's a radical change in many ways in a child's experience in school. Number one, and not in any order, these are all important. But there's joy, and hopefully some of these stories will convey that. It's much more joyful to learn about the world and to make learning about the world primary in what you're doing than it is to talk about standards or comprehension strategies or anything like that. Very few kids go home and talk about how what they learned this week about details and key ideas. Or the main idea, et cetera. And that this doesn't make it to the dinner table as compared to, say, polar bears or tornadoes or space or sports or bugs. Number two, it creates a community in the classroom. In traditional balanced literacy, it was kind of like it was like Fontes and Pinnell apartheid. Some students were reading at a lower level, some were reading at a higher level, some groups got to talk about a book, some individuals shared. Here, everybody's learning about the same topic. And they read the core text, grade level, they all read together. So even if there's some other texts that are different levels that students are reading, like in some of the programs, but that they're reading on the same topic, and it's a community. And that's a huge difference in terms of community, but also in terms of social and emotional learning. I mean, how do you have social and emotional learning when every day, beginning in kindergarten, kids are put into different groups based on their ability to read? So you have elements of joy, of social and emotional learning, of culture and community that are all wrapped up in these new curriculums that are capable of, for K to 5 certainly, transforming elementary education. It's not going to happen right away. Change doesn't happen overnight, and these curriculum, for all these reasons, have a chance to change the world for children in a very positive way.
Yeah, so much of that resonates that when we focus on knowledge versus standards and skills, there's so much, I mean, among all the other things you said, there's so much equity and elements of community and togetherness that rise up.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that joy part. I have an almost 5-year-old now, and so he's not quite yet kindergarten, but still, like, you can see the joy when he learns about new things every single day. And so to not capitalize on that in school just seems kind of silly. I mean, he loves learning about any kind of topic. We just start to get into it and learn more and more about it. So it just makes sense.
It makes sense, and the research started in 1985, and it's 2020, and we're starting to bring it into the world.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm thinking that it might be a really good time, David, for you to share some of your stories. And I know you promised that they were going to be like top-notch stories. So hilarious and powerful. So that's a lot to live up to. So I'm looking for Jerry Seinfeld status here. Like, I'm ready.
All right. Well, this is one of my favorite stories. In one of these programs, after spending a whole day there, maybe 2 days there, and I'm sitting around a table with teachers, and I don't even know if teachers were there, maybe 20, 25 kids. And, they're telling all the kinds of things that we know, that we're talking about, that they like about this new program. It was like the first year. And so then I say, look, can you tell me something you don't like? Tell me something that's boring. No, silence. And I usually can get kids to warm up. So I go a little, all right, come on guys, there's got to be something. There's got to be something that's boring or stupid. You've been doing this all year. You can't come up with something that's boring and stupid? And then I say, haven't you read the instruction manual for being a kid? And then this little girl raises her hand, who I've already developed an attachment to because her name is Brooklyn, where I grew up. Brooklyn raises her hand, kind of hesitantly. She didn't strike me as necessarily the most confident kid. She raises her hand and says, "There's an instruction manual?" Which, of course, was great for everybody to hear. And I had to explain that there's really not an instruction manual. And I
being a
think that
kid.
was, I kind of gave up at that point that I was going to get anything out of them that they really didn't like. So I think that tells you, you could say that they were hesitant to be negative, even though, as I said, I think I usually can pull things out of kids. I've been doing it for I don't know how many years. It speaks to how much fun and how much joy there is in a knowledge-based curriculum. One of the programs, a bunch of them have Greek and Roman gods, etc. But in one, the kids were making up. This is really interesting. They were making up games based on the Greek heroes and gods, or the Roman heroes and gods, and for their recess games during lunchtime. So they brought the curriculum out during lunch. And I don't know if this was the same school or not. They also made playing cards. They made their own playing cards based on the Greek heroes and the Greek Romans. I think the playing cards was built into the curriculum, but the games that the kids played was their own idea. And again, you don't get kids taking into recess to make up games about standards or comprehension strategies or pronoun references, etc. You get that when you're teaching about learning about the world. In terms of culture and joy, here's a short story. Again, a day or 2 days in a school, one of these programs, and apparently they were studying insects. And these two kindergarten kids are in the hall looking at this thing crawl down the wall. And they're starting to get into a heated argument too. Two kindergarten boys. I don't think it would come out to violence, but they were clearly yelling at each other about whether this thing that was creeping on the wall was an insect or an arachnid. So I happened to be there, and I was still bigger than them. So before they came to blows, I could say, look, we could figure this out. Pull the tissue out. Let's gently take this creature. And they actually knew that word. Let's take this creature into the room under one of the magnifying glasses, and what should we do? And one kid said, well, count the legs. So we went in, counted the legs with the whole class at that point. Everybody observed. And it came to the conclusion, I forgot whether it was an insect or an arachnid. I think it was an insect, but that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is the whole class gathered around to see who was going to win this debate about whether or not it was an insect or arachnid. What it means is the kids were not that heated if they didn't value knowledge. This is 5-year-olds. It had to mean something for them that they were learning about the world.
I love that. That makes me laugh that they just were standing there having that heated argument, and the solution was even to learn more. Right? To use a magnifying glass and to look under the microscope. And it's just learning, Learning promotes more learning, so there's more, yes. It's just more and more and more. I think you said, David, that you're taking it onto the playground, you're taking it into the cafeteria, it's in the hallway, and students are talking about these topics, interested about the topics that they're learning, and they want to learn more. We've had librarians on our show who say that kids go into the library and they're looking for more books on their topics that they want. They make videos about their topics. I just think there's so much opportunity for learning. There's field trip connections. I mean, we could go on all day.
Knowledge begets knowledge. Knowledge of words begets knowledge of words, hence vocabulary. Knowledge of the world begets more knowledge of the world, and both of those they're kind of common sense in a lot of ways, but they're also founded in quite a bit of research.
David, I have a quick question. So, I love hearing these stories about how kids actually react to gaining this knowledge, because I think the one criticism I see the most about knowledge building curricula is that the topics are inappropriate for younger kids, or not developmentally appropriate, or they won't be ready for it.
Or the texts are too difficult. That too. I see that.
Yeah, but even just the topics, regardless of what the text difficulty is, I think just the topics I hear people say, I remember someone saying well, like continents in kindergarten is not appropriate for kids to be learning about. And I never taught kids that age level, so I've always been a little skeptical. But just wondering your thoughts that you've heard these stories from the mouths of children and seeing them in classrooms and from teachers. If you have any thoughts on that.
I have two stories for that. One was at a national conference, and it was for K2, early childhood. And I was presenting the curriculum. I don't remember which program. And someone raises their hand and says, I don't see why our kids should be learning about Native Americans. They should be learning about their neighborhood. They should be learning about what's close to them, which you may know, that used to be the conventional wisdom in early childhood education. What we're going to teach you about what you see and know every day, grocery stores and the fire trucks and so forth. Because we all know kids are not interested about learning in the world. They're interested in learning about what they already know. So that was the curriculum in almost every K-2 program in America for a long time. And someone, and this other gentleman in the front of the room gets up and says, first of all, he turns around and says to that person, well, first of all, I happen to be Native American. And I can't tell you how important it is to me that young children are learning about the people who settled this country long before white people. That was number one. And number two, and then he said, as the speaker said, can you show me some evidence that this doesn't work? Because he just presented a whole screen full of evidence that it works. So that's one. I think two, on another level, students in fifth grade studying space. Now, space doesn't get that kind of criticism, but this tells you how invested kids are in things. And part of the unit included the space program, et cetera. And part of it was, should resources be going into this? And this was in a fairly low-income area. Should resources be going to the moon or going to Mars when we have all kinds of things here that people need more resources for? And they got into a debate on this. I think you two probably know this unit. They got into a debate about this, and it was really intense because they clearly took sides. And at some point, I almost felt like in the end, what's that book about the kids stranded on the island? That's almost required reading in middle school. The kids are stranded on an island, and they have
Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies.
Oh, okay. Older.
I'm almost picturing the Lord of the Flies in the end, in the movie, when the naval officer lands, and you get this shot of the kids looking up at this tall, established adult, an adult, and everything changes. I almost felt like I should step in here before they came to blows again, because it was really heated. Which makes sense, given the topic. And then I started talking about, we're not going to settle this here today. And maybe you won't settle this in later classes. And I said, adults talk about this. Articles have been written about this. Usually, curriculums and programs don't bring this to fourth or fifth graders. But the program you're using brings this to fourth graders or fifth graders. I think it was fifth. And that changed everything because the two sides united in anger about, what do they think? We can't deal with these ideas? That's so stupid. We can deal with these ideas, and we should. So I don't have a story like that for like Mesopotamia, which gets a lot of criticism, that for some reason kids in kindergarten shouldn't learn about some of the first cities and shouldn't learn about how cities evolved around rivers because everybody needs water. So I think the answer is in these stories. The answer is in how invested kids are and how invested teachers are. And that's also an important point. Teachers teachers will say that it's a shift to reading grade level text with everybody. You two know that, and probably all the people who listen to this really good podcast you guys do know that it's a shift to complex text. And teachers sometimes talk about that and sometimes get frustrated. But it's the idea that it's developmentally appropriate, that's maybe 1 or 2% of the criticisms that I get from teachers. It's very rare. And it's never from teachers that have been using the program. It's always from teachers who are considering the program or debating whether to make this shift. And that's a huge difference also. So that's a good point.
Well, I have a question, David. I think the most frequent question Melissa and I receive from listeners is, what can teachers do when they don't have a knowledge building curriculum? Because I think what you're making so many people think of with today's conversation is how important it is to build knowledge in students and how to grow knowledge for all of those reasons, right? For social emotional learning, for the joy, for the culture, and the sense of community. So if we want to bring those elements to classrooms, but they don't have a knowledge building curriculum, we don't really know what to tell folks. And that's the honest truth.
Student Achievement Partners has a whole section on text sets. Those are really good. For grades 3 and up, emphasizing text that students read themselves, all anybody has to do is do a search for text sets, and there's a whole section on text sets. What are text sets? How do we make them? And by the way, here's about 30 that you can use. And those grow knowledge absolutely. And they were written by teachers across the country. Mm-hmm. That's one. Two, I think even better, is the Read Aloud project. And that's basically text sets, but it is for Read Aloud. So it's for K to 2. And the basic idea is, I think, brilliant. You start off with with a really rich, beautiful Read Aloud text. Like, let's say there was one we did on The Spider and the Fly, which is a great story, been around forever. And you take days to teach that, maybe a whole week. You have drawings, you have acting out, you have making puppets, a puppet for the spider, a puppet for the fly, etc. You draw webs and so forth. And that's like a close reading. I think that was designed for first grade, maybe K. And then you follow that with 3 or 4 texts that you don't dive into with that degree of depth. And that's the research, that's the basis of the research for how a series of texts on a topic by Beck and McCown grows knowledge. When you stay on topic, that grows knowledge. And that's a perfect example of doing that. The Read Aloud project has maybe 50 or 60 lessons like that. More than half of them include the text set. You can absolutely have a knowledge growing curriculum based on the Read Aloud project and the text sets. And I believe the text sets now on Achieve the Core have also been updated in some ways to address more culturally relevant pedagogy as well. I'm not sure if all of them have, but many have. So that's an abundance of resources that are free and easily accessible.
Is the Read Aloud project on Student Achievement Partners as well?
Yep, both are on student. They're both Student Achievement Partners programs.
Yeah, that's definitely a starting point for sure.
That could be start, middle, and end. It's quite extensive.
Yeah, I was thinking if teachers are listening and they're wondering, well, I have curriculum. How do I know if it is knowledge rich or knowledge building and it really is valid and recommended by experts? I usually recommend that people head to Knowledge Matters campaign to find a list of curriculum there. Do you have any other recommendations, David, or any other thoughts?
Well, that's the best. Thanks for recommending that. We just wrote an article for them, and we're doing some more work with them now.
David and Meredith list in the back of their book. So if they have Know Better, Do Better, they can look at that list.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
2 things, because it's easy to get confused because the standards say half the text has to be nonfiction. So it's easy to get confused. Number one, Are the texts that they're reading related? Are you reading a text about birds, and then maybe another text about eagles, and then there's a third text about water levels? So number one, see how tightly connected the topics are in the units in your program. That's number one. Number two, just as important, how many of the questions are addressing standards and comprehension strategies, and how many are addressing knowledge? I've looked at some programs that are clearly not knowledge-based, that are half informational text, that think they're knowledge-based, and the number of questions addressing knowledge is like in the neighborhood of 10, 20%, and standards and strategies are like 80%. So how many questions address knowledge, and how closely coherent are the topics? And what's the culminating assignment or end activity in some way? Is the end activity connected to the knowledge? Is the end activity connected to the text that are connected to the knowledge? I think with those three things, you don't need an elaborate thing, but a more elaborate thing, not too elaborate, because some of these things get crazy freaking elaborate, and I'm guilty of doing that. But Knowledge Matters is going to have something that's much less elaborate and much more readable that can help people. But just those 3 points, you can't go wrong with starting with those.
Well, do you want to share your last stories with us?
Yes. Not much a story, but it's stunning that it's propped up in like at least 3 programs in debriefs with teachers. What teachers say when they start talking, and in a couple of cases, teachers say, it's not just that my weakest readers are more involved than they ever were before. It's that they're more involved than they ever thought they could be before. More involved than I ever thought they could be. And in at least one case, that teachers tear up. That's a really strong statement. To have teachers say, based on changing a curriculum, which demanded a lot of mental shifts of them, that this program means my weakest readers, and teachers are so attuned to their weak readers, are not just more involved than they ever were before, but more involved than I ever thought they were before. And that's a tribute to the knowledge-based programs. For sure.
I agree. I hear that all the time, that teachers are surprised or shocked by how much their students can do after they implement one of these programs. And I mean, you're right, that changes the way they're viewing their students, and that's huge.
Absolutely. A lot of the letters I got when I collected these, which I didn't get to all of them, were about just what you said, Lori. Kids who came up and said, Mr. So-and-so, I didn't think I could write, but I wrote all this about the heart because I know about the heart now. A lot of the writing that we asked especially little kids to do, it was like we were creating modern fiction writers. We want them to have that insight, those what Lucy Corkins called those small moments. I wish Meredith was here because she got stuck in this, because that's the only thing you learned. And she was teaching kindergarten in our school, and as soon as she announced it was writing, she'd have to bring out a box of tissues because half the class would start crying. That's not what writing is supposed to be. But as soon as we switched to, we had to create our own curriculum because it was long before knowledge-based curriculums, and we did. We created the general knowledge curriculum in our school, which is a story in chapter 2 in the next book. And it was a different world when the kids started writing about what they were reading and learning about. That's absolutely true. And a lot of the stories I got were exactly like that.
Well, David, we can't thank you enough for joining us today. You are always like such a joyful voice. So I'm so glad that you joined us today. And you invited yourself on the podcast. So thank you for inviting yourself.
Yes. I wanted to get these funny stories out there. I have a final question. So if Seinfeld is 10, where do I fall today?
You did pretty good. I give you like a 9.5. You did pretty good.
All right. On that note, I'll say goodbye. I'll see you at least next time when the next book comes out.
We can't wait.
Okay. You do a good job, you two. I hear good things about you all the time.
Too.
Oh, thanks, David. That means a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
To stay connected with us, sign up for our email list at literacypodcast.com. Join our Facebook group and follow us on Instagram and Twitter.
If this episode resonated with you, take a moment to share with a teacher friend or leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
Just a quick reminder that the views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests of the Melissa and Lori Love Literacy podcast are not necessarily the opinions of Great Minds PBC or its employees.
We appreciate you so much, and we're so glad you're here to learn with us.